you everyone for making extra time for a fourth session this week, and hopefully we can wrap up everything and come to a resolution here today. I've had a chance to speak with most of you all privately, and so I think I'm confident that we'll come up with a consensus decision today among this group. There are two items that we were to vote on. Still, we voted on most of them last meeting. The two that were outstanding were the salary adjustments for our representatives, and then the second one would be how we either phase that in over time or all at once in the beginning of the 4-year term. So those are the two items that were carried over from last week or last meeting, and then there were two technical items that Philip is going to outline for us that I think we could vote on those initially. I think they're pretty quick, similar to some of the other items, but we should have record of those decisions. So any questions before we jump into things here?
So Marco, the two items really could, the first two things you talk about really could be one item. Am I right? I mean, in the final motion, you could have what the timing is, correct?
If someone makes a motion for that, then and it's voted on, then yes, we could couple them together, but we could also separately vote on those if that's what we wanted to do.
Okay.
So I had broken it out separately, thinking that people may have, depending on what the first vote was, may feel differently about how we phase it in, which is why I broke it out separately.
Marco, I just want to stay in whatever order you want. I did have a couple of very brief kind of clarifying questions about Exhibit 51, but I just want to note that so that when you're ready to go and kind of move into that phase of the discussion, I just want to note I got a couple of quick questions.
Yeah, we could do that. I think, like I said, Philip's the two items that Philip has are going to be quick. So
okay,
or hopefully they're quick.
Yeah,
and then we can go over your questions on Exhibit 51.
Okay. On Exhibit 51, and I, great job to DLS as always in terms of the quick turnaround. And I found it helpful just to kind of have all of that summarized and in one place. And I think it helped because it kind of essentially added these years to the information that was in the information that was provided back in November. On the 2023 actions that are reflected for state employees like AFSCME, MPEC, SLEOLA, the percentage increases, I just want to confirm this, they don't reflect the one-time non-recurring cash grants, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, it does not include the bonuses, which and I believe I said they were $1,000 bonuses last time, and it's actually $1,000 in addition to a $500 bonus that had previously been negotiated. So it's actually $1,500 bonuses total.
Okay. I don't think it makes sense to talk about cash bonuses for legislators. And, I just want to make sure that we know and kind of had talked about the totality of the compensation adjustments. So I just wanted to clarify that. And then the second related question, for 2023, when it shows 2% for AFSCME or 8% for SLEOLA, that does not include the step increases, correct? That's just the COLA.
That's correct. That's just the COLA and does not account for the increment, which on average is about 2.4%, based on the timing of the increment.
Okay. And I don't know if you can confirm this, but from my past life negotiating contract agreements with, within the state bargaining units, aren't almost all of the increments generally in that 2 to 2.5% range?
Right. The average, the assumption that we use when we're building our forecast is 2.4%.
Okay. And approximately 80% of state employees get increments when increments are awarded.
I'm not sure of the exact number.
That's my recollection from back when I was doing it. So I just wanted to, I thought you might be able to validate that, but that's my recollection. So,
right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then one other question, if possible, unless somebody has a question about.
Well, I guess, Jason, can you just, as part of this topic, can you just clarify again the difference between the COLA and the increment so that we're all on the same page?
Right. So the state has salary schedules that have 20 or so steps per employee, and an increment moves you up one step, whereas a COLA increases everything on the schedule, so that the biggest difference is for employees who don't yet work for the state that would come in at a higher floor than they would otherwise.
But effectively, if you're in AFSCME or SLEOLA, the vast majority of employees in 2023 are going to get the 2 or the 8% that's listed for 2023, and then they're going to get an additional 2.4% in the COLA.
That's
So
correct.
your actual adjustment would be more along the lines of 4.4 or 10.4 in 2023.
Right.
Yeah. And I'm just throwing that out there because I know a lot of people aren't kind of, immersed in the salary schedules and the way kind of the comp structure works at the state. I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that.
So Jason, what's reflected in Exhibit 51 is the increment or the COLA for those particular unions?
That's the COLA.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Right.
So it's excluding the increment component of that, of moving along the steps.
Correct.
Okay. Which is typically, you said 2.4%.
That's the average per,
Okay.
it's dependent on each actual salary and where you are on the scale, but the average is 2.4%. Yeah.
Understood. And then Matt, any other?
I have one more question, but it's just on the 3 options. I mean, if and when you're ready to move on, I'm happy to raise it.
Could we table that for now, just so we can
Sure.
get through this, so we don't forget before the end?
Yeah.
So, Philip, you want to walk through the 2 things that we need to vote on, and then if somebody wants to make a motion and second, we can just vote on them quickly.
Yes, so just a bit of follow-up from, you've already voted last time about the clarifying changes on the survivor benefits and the designations of beneficiaries. I uncovered one additional piece that I think makes sense to add in, which would be, and I emailed this to everybody, language in state code allows for the designation beneficiary to either be done by a written acknowledged notarized document or through the system's electronic portal. They created a member portal a few years ago that allows for that. The current legislative plan only references the written acknowledged document. So the change would just be to make it consistent with the other state plans where it's either the notarized form or, to the extent available in the system, the electronic portal process. So just put the legislative plan on the same footing to the extent it's an available option as the other systems.
So do we have a motion to add that language to the already approved language for the survivor benefit?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Or the vote passes?
And then the other thing is just a technical vote to update the relevant years for the next term where applicable throughout the formal resolution that'll be the commission's work product. There are a few instances in the existing resolution where it references the years for the current term, so just need to update those. It's a technical update so that the resolution is applicable to the next term.
Do we have a motion to update the dates where applicable?
So
Do we have a
moved.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay, it passes. Okay, so we can hop into the salary discussion now. Commissioner Gallagher, it sounded like you had some additional questions on the different options that were previously laid out, and I understand that some may have other options now additionally now that we have this new information. So welcome to have your thoughts on that, on your questions Commissioner Gallagher, and then we can open up the floor
Sure.
for others to
It's just
discuss.
one very quick clarifying question. I think what we've been calling option 3, the 9.9% option, I think on the decision document, it reflects that that the underpinnings of that are the 2019 to 2021 CPI. So I think that's like a 3-year calculation, 19, 20, and 21. And my question to DLS was just, I think it's 3 years of CPI, and then the option 3 is recommending phasing that in for 4 years over like the term of this recommendation. And I'm just curious, like methodologically, like why would it be 3 years of CPI phased in over 4 as opposed to 4 years of CPI phased in over 4?
So I think there might have been 2 versions, Simon, if you wanted to.
Yeah, so the way this was developed is obviously the last increase for legislators was in the calendar 2018. So if you look at the CPI, we have the CPI for calendars 2019 through 21. That gets you to about 7.4%. And what the chair asked for was to say, look, let's take that average over those 3 years and apply it to 4.
Oh, okay. All
And
right.
that gets you to almost 10%. So that's how we did it, because we don't, obviously we have a projection for inflation for 2022 from our economic forecasting folks that we contract with, but we decided, I think the decision was to go with the 3 years most recent actuals.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. But it's not like 3 years of inflationary increases spread over 4. It's really meant to represent 4 years. Like when you said the 9.9, that is 4 years of CPI, really.
Yeah, it basically assumes that the next, it assumes that next year's inflation rate will be around 2.5%.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That was my only clarifying question, Mr. Chair.
Okay, any other questions before we dive into further discussion? Okay, so there has been quite a bit of discussion based on the information that has been provided. We have a number of what I feel are relevant market data points. There's been some discussion around how we define the market, and we can debate that, whether it's representatives from other states, whether it's other state employees. I think we have the information we need, and I think I'd open up a dialogue and see if we can begin to get to a consensus on what we think is a fair increase based on the relevant data we have, what we know to be the work or believe to be the work of these representatives and the hours commitments for these individuals. And then I'd ask for somebody to make a motion for us to vote on, and then to second, and then hopefully everyone could take their videos off camera. We can get a more accurate vote on yays or nays, and then if anyone wants to abstain from those votes, and then if there's a simple majority, we can it will pass. If not, we'll make a motion for a second option. So I think, and I'll open it up to you all, and then I'll offer up my opinion on kind of where I believe kind of my position is and where I think we should land.
Mark, I apologize to the committee because I'm going to repeat some things I talked about before, but because this is being recorded, and also the actions of the other commissions are now starting to be reported in the media, I just wanted to be sure that I shared with what I saw from the data that was being presented. Are the members being fairly and competitively paid? And what I saw when I looked through this is that I felt that they were being fairly and competitively paid. When you compare their salaries against those that are full-time, they're in the top 10. They are the third highest paid of those in the hybrid category. The turnover is very low. It's about 7%. It's less than 7% annualized. There's no lack of candidates. There's no exodus due to pay rates. The last thing there are over 170,000 Marylanders right now unemployed, and just not sure this is the right time to give a big increase to the members. With that said, I could support something that provided a minimal adjustment over the 4 years, maybe something, a minimal adjustment each year, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%, or something like that, just to recognize their work that they've done, et cetera. But I think whatever we decide to do, we need to go in realizing our members are fairly paid based on the competition. And Mr. Chairman, that's really all I had to say. I just wanted to have that on the record one more time, that this is what the data is telling us. At least it's telling me, it's how I'm seeing it. So,
Thank you, Commissioner Rakowski.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just a couple of quick observations, and some of these are now based on the information we received. I'm sort of looking at Exhibit 51, which kind of codified what we're seeing in the judiciary, et cetera. And if I read it correctly, then, so excluding the governor and the secretary of state, we're looking at an annualized over the 4-year period of increases by like 17 to 24%. And it may well be apples to oranges, and we don't have the context about where those salaries came from, but nonetheless, those are pretty significant and far greater than what we're talking about. And another observation I might make back to Exhibits 49 and 50 about legislative activity, I think those are very good documents and well put together as always, but I think in some respects it probably substantially understates the amount of time outside of the legislative session. For example, the amount of time that any legislature is going to spend interacting with their county councils, county commissioners, with constituencies. Every place is unique in some ways. If you're in Southern Maryland, you're in the legislature, you're going to spend a substantial amount of time talking with the Navy and the contracting community, and certainly everyone with the Chamber of Commerce and the education and all that, with constituent service, other kind of civic organizations. But so I think there's a substantial amount of time that's not necessarily accounted for in that, which I think changes the complexion of how much time outside of the session itself is given. So I think those are important factors. And again, the percentage given to other state officials is not necessarily a baseline for this, but it's informative and illustrative that there's pretty substantial increases have been given to these other officers. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, if I could make a couple of comments. I think the data and DLS, as always, has done an amazing job kind of supporting the work of the commission. And I found the most recent data, compiling the information on the negotiated pay raises and the other compensation commissions very helpful. In my view of the data, the General Assembly they're outside of the top quintile. So they're outside of the top 20% of the other 49 legislators that are out there in terms of salary, the legislative staff ratios, the permanent staff ratios. So we're above average, but we're not exceptional in that top, top 20% or 1/5. And I think, my feel on that is we don't want to underpay, we're competitive, we're justifiable. I think it's an important job and it's an important role, and it should be relatively well compensated. And I feel like we are, somewhat in a good position right there. What I found really compelling kind of going back through everything was that, there's one exhibit that shows the vast majority, the majority of legislatures around the country have seen increases since 2017. And what I found particularly compelling is when you go back through the previous histories of the commissions, there was no action in 18, there was action in 14, I think, and then there was no action in 10. So I think it's, if you go back to, it's really since 2006 till now, there's been 4 years where there was a phased in increase. But other than that, we've got kind of 3 windows where the salaries haven't been adjusted. And I think when you think about like the last 15 years, and there's only 4 years where there were adjustments, I think that is real pressure in terms of the buying power of those types of salaries. And I think that, the inaction in some of those periods was understandable, particularly given the financial constraints being faced by the state. But thankfully, those are not, as acute as they were at various points in time. I would just say, and I'm happy to make this a motion if and when you're ready. I'd love to get to a consensus on the committee, and maybe there can be some additional dialogue. Heading into the last meeting, I was of the mind we needed to do something. I thought option 2 was too low. I thought option 3 might be appropriate. But as I've looked at the data, as I've looked at the other actions that are being taken, and just refreshing myself on the nuance of steps and increments and cash adjustments, I'd be prepared to support up to a 4% increase per year for the General Assembly. And that might be farther than other members of the commission want to go. But when I look at the almost total lack of action between 2006 and 2021, when I look at what's happening for some of the constitutional officers, all of the judiciary, and then the state employees right now, I think you can justify a 4% increase adjustment each year. And, I take the responsibility very seriously, and, I'm very mindful of the affordability. Ultimately, what we are recommending becomes the ceiling, and it doesn't inhibit the General Assembly from making a further downward adjustment if they think that is warranted. And I am prepared to go beyond the 9.9 option. And I would be prepared to make a motion for up to 4% a year phased in each year. But, I'd love to get other people's feedback, and, ultimately I would really hope that we could get to a consensus point on that. But I feel like that number could be justified given the actions of the other commissions, given the steps that are being taken with the statewide workforce, and particularly in reflecting on how little change there has been in legislature salary since 2006.
Yeah, Matt, I think you laid out a pretty strong and compelling case. And I think that as we considered, excuse me, some of the data that DLS provided, I think I've kind of beat this drum a number of times. I think that the notion that the General Assembly is part-time is just not accurate. The members are full-time, combined with the complexity of the work and the legislative pressures that we've seen, the types of things that the General Assembly are taking up are just getting more and more complex. I think combined with the fact that, as you said, Matt, not really seeing any action the better part of the past 15 years or so, I would tend to say that the inaction is effectively a cut because of the way inflationary pressures work. So I think that a 4%, based on what we've seen the other constitutional officers receive, based on what we've seen with some of the state employees, based on the fact that we know the demands of the job have only increased over the last 15 years or so, not eased. I think that the data that we've seen and what we know more than justifies 4%. I would say that's probably a floor as opposed to something that's high or approaching something that's substantial.
So if we would give 4% per year, that would take our salaries and make them the highest salaries of any of the hybrid. It would probably, I haven't done the calculations, don't have it in front of me, but it probably would move us up in the top 10 of those that are full-time. Is that where we want our salaries to be?
I think so.
The fact there has been no lack of action and the salaries are still competitive, that seems reasonable to me. So
Commissioner,
I still don't see anything that says give them, 4% a year or 20% over 16, almost 16, over 16% for 4 years. I just don't see anything that says that.
Well, Commissioner, I think that, in my experience and having been, around Annapolis and around these discussions in the past, I think that the decision-making that's happened in the past has largely been rooted in the fiscal conditions at the time. And that, given where we were in eras like 2010 with the Great Recession and periods like 2006 when the state had very, very significant structural deficits, I think the actions were understandable. And I think that there maybe even have been one year where the General Assembly and some of the constitutional officers gave up, adjustments that had been recommended. I also think that prospectively, we have a majority of legislators that are legislative bodies across the country who have acted in the last 4 years and are likely to act going forward, that when we don't act, you don't get another shot at this for 4 years. And, I just think that I understand your concern about being in the top 10. I mean, I think we're 13th right now. And if we take no action or minimal action, we're going to slide back much further than where we are at 13th. And if other legislatures, and we've already got data that shows a majority of legislatures have already acted on this over the last 4 years, if we do something that is justifiable from an inflationary standpoint, and I think it's clearly justifiable given the salary actions of most of the other constitutional officers, judiciary, and state employees, I don't think we're necessarily going to break into that top 10. I think we're likely going to stay in that second quintile. I mean, that's just my guess based on how this works and these types of numbers, but I don't think that that's an absolute certainty that we break into the top 10.
Yeah, the data that I had, which is what Philip supplied us, says that we're 10 out of the 11 full-time members. So maybe you have some additional
data
data.
Said we're 13th overall out of the 50 legislators. I thought we're 13th out of 50 in terms of
unless there's been updated data, the data that was provided from the very first meeting that we had, we're 10th out of 11.
I think you're both correct. Actually,
I want you as my professor.
Mr. Gallia is correct that we're 13th overall right now. You're correct that we do rank above one of the full-time, but we're also third for hybrid. I think Mr. Gallagher's point is that's if we went to that and if you went to for 4% and if you agreed to do it in one lump sum, that would put you at about 9th. Right, it would put you ahead. It would put you as the highest hybrid legislature right now. If you phase it in, Mr. Gallagher is correct. All bets are off because we don't know what other states are going to do.
Right, understand that.
So if you phase it in, actually, you wouldn't be quite so high. But yeah, that's what you're. So I think actually you're both kind of correct on that.
Okay.
I would just add that I very much would like to get to a consensus, and Mr. Chair, I'll be happy to make it a motion, whenever you want to procedurally, but I'd love to hear from other commissioners and see if we can kind of get to a point where we feel comfortable with something collectively, because I think that's the best potential outcome here.
Yeah, and I'll just make some comments, but I will have asked others to jump in, but haven't spoken with most of you all individually, and then also speaking with some of the staff that had participated in prior commissions. I think it was pretty easy previously to get to a consensus previously, that even from the start, the opinions were pretty consistent, but having spoken with each of you individually, it seems like there's varying degrees of at least their starting points of where individuals put their preference. And so I do think we're going to have to find a middle ground if we do want to get to a consensus. It's probably not going to be no increase. I don't think we'd have complete 5 votes for that. And I don't think we're going to have something in the 6 to 7% increase. So I think it is going to have to be something in the middle ground, just to prepare everybody, just from what I'm hearing from everyone as far as their preference. So I'll preface that and then open it up to others to continue to add their input.
This is LaTosha speaking. Thank you, Matt, Thank you, Wendell, for sharing your perspectives. They're quite spirited. I will share that I am more in alignment with Matt's and Lester's perspective that was shared. Based on the data, based on, we've gotten the preliminary survey back sharing our staffers are operating closer to a full-time schedule with the way they support their constituents. We haven't even talked about the technological advances in our society where it's the expectation for our legislators to be on 24/7, responding to social media, et cetera. And so for me right now, with the current percentages presented, previously on paper by the team, I'm not in support of 9.9. I am in support of what Matt has presented, closer to 4% per year. So that's my perspective. And I do support a lot of the valid points that Matt has presented. And I've shared from the beginning, I'm in support of our legislators and the hard work that they do to support our state. And it is my hope that this commission, that we remain in alignment to represent that as well.
Any others like to offer up their thoughts?
I think I've already shared mine, but essentially, I think at the very least, we have to do the cost of living adjustment. If we do that, I think it should be, I'm in favor of doing it immediately, given that they've already had the cost of living increase in there, if I'm not opposed to slightly more based on the statewide increases and some of the other comments that have been shared. But I would say that would definitely have to be phased in. So, I guess I'm in the camp of cost of living increase across the board. And I think somebody mentioned it earlier, and I've said it before. I think that if we do less, then it's essentially a pay cut. We've been where we are relative to other states for a long time. This is not anything new. So, there doesn't seem to be a rationale to change where we are relative to other states. I understand that potentially giving an increase changes it slightly, but I don't think that that's material, because I do think that other states will, there will be changes also based on cost of living and so on. So, and for all the other reasons mentioned, such as I was on the past commission, and it was that was a primary reason was, the fiscal condition. And I know, there haven't been increases. The workload has clearly increased over the last decade substantially. And I don't think it's fair to compare to all the other hybrids. So I guess those are my views.
A quick question for DLS, just mechanically. If the commission approves 4%, 3.5%, 3%, whatever it is, and obviously that becomes binding, the General Assembly still has the ability that if there was a massive downturn in the economy, that they can reduce the salary level, can't they? Like within the next 4-year period of the commission, like they do have that ability, don't they?
That's correct. The commission would be effectively setting the ceiling.
Okay. So again, and Mr. Chair, I'll make the proposal when it makes sense. I want to do something that I think is justifiable, that stands up in comparison to the other commissions and the other salary actions, and ultimately still affords some flexibility to the General Assembly so that if conditions change, that they have the ability to kind of go down. But if, I'm just hesitant about going low just for the sake of going low, because it has serious implications, and just reflecting on past commissions and these 4-year increments, again, 2006 to 2021, there's been one period of action and adjustment, and that doesn't strike me as right. And I feel like that we've got to do something. It should be more than minimal. And, there is still opportunity for the General Assembly to adjust that downward if conditions warrant it.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, that authority to adjust downwards would be in the upcoming legislative session. Once the term starts, the resolution is binding.
And they can't, so they would not be able to do it next legislative
Correct.
session. So they would have to be over the next 100 or so days.
In the next legislative session,
Yeah.
so next 90 days almost.
But Philip, in 2 years from now, if the economy hit the skids, if revenues kind of fell off the face of the earth, wouldn't they have the ability through BRFA language to forego the adjustments that were already planned?
They have to do
No,
it.
I believe previously it was not, like when furloughs happened, those were not applicable to the certain positions, including the legislature, but
they have the ability to give the money back. And I believe
there was, I think, a voluntary program that many participated in.
I'm not saying that they will. I'm just saying that
Right.
there are options that are out. I wasn't trying to overstate that. I was just trying to provide
Correct.
some historical context.
Yes.
So I just want to put some numbers out there. If we would give 2% every year, so this is 2, so four times, that would end up being an 8.2% over the life. If it's 2.5, it's about 10. It's a little more than 10% over the life. 3% is 12.5, and 4 is 17. So just to look at where will we move if we pick one of those numbers. I'm not saying we should, but that's where the final salary increase would be. It'd be if the 4% that you were saying earlier would be 17% over, and 2%, which is I think that's probably what everybody's thinking is the low end, is an 8%. So
don't we have the option to do a single increase now? Because if the conversation is that they haven't had an increase for a long period of time, and we're basing it on cost of living, so effectively they've gotten a cut, then for me, it seems like we should come to a number that we do at one time and just say, this is what the number is, instead of the phasing.
I think
that's what happened last time, right? I mean, not the last commission, but the last time they got an increase the first year and nothing for the last 3.
No, the last time there was an increase, it was phased in over 4 years.
Oh, was okay.
There's been varying phase-in decisions. If you look back at the other documents, it's varied depending on the amounts each commission.
Sorry to distract.
Oh, that's okay. So I would just say, I appreciate everyone's points here, and appreciate the collegiality that you all have given to each other and the respect you all have demonstrated to each other. And I think just some thoughts that I have. When I saw the grid of all the adjustments for our other representative officers and members of the state that have state employment, in comparing those to the private sector, I mean, many of those far exceeded, not just on a 1-year period, but more importantly on a 4-year period, what somebody in the private sector would expect over that period of time. So especially in the 6-7% range was just a little, it was not something that I felt comfortable with. A 4%, Commissioner Gallagher, a little bit more comfortable with those, but seeing these as really the leaders of our organization or the state here, I would tend to put them closer in line with what I would expect the governor and some of those officers. When you look at how other organizations tend to be run, those at the that are viewed as leaders tend to have less of an increase year to year than you would provide to each of your employees. So I understand all the points, but that's sort of where my head's at. And I do think that if we did something towards the lower end, accelerating that, to the beginning would be a fair compromise here, so that they would be able to experience that that higher salary for a longer period of time, but not reach the higher ceiling, I think would be a compromise that I could support as well. But certainly understand everyone's points and so any others? If not, I will.
So I just, that was a good interest, that made me think a little bit. So I was wondering, would there be any interest we could do something like 4%, and then I think I had 2.5 and 2.5, and that would be a 12.5% of the year. If that's, something that would be of interest. I don't think I could support 4% for 4 years, but
You're muted, Matt.
If you could just restate that, were you saying 4, 4, 2.5, 2.5?
I think I want to redo my numbers, but that the 4 to 4, and then I'm not sure if I used 2% or 2.5%, but it came out to 12%, a little over 12% over the life of the resolution. Let me just do that again real quick. I'm not the finance person here, okay, but I'm just pointing that out in case somebody finds a mistake in my math. Although as a compensation person, I was not a I wasn't a finance person.
Can we bring in reinforcements?
I guess that's the
So
resident
it was
CFO, I can do it.
It was if we do 2.5 for the last 2 years, 2.5, it was 13.6. So I must have used 2 for the other because it was more like 12.3.
Yeah, that's correct. It's 13.6.
Yeah. So
would you be targeting a 12% over the period? Is that what you're?
That's where I could hop on board with a 4, 4, and a 2 and a 2. That makes a 12 point something percent over the life of the contract. It's not a contract, but resolution. It provides some makeup, if that's the right word, and it also falls in line with some of the other percentages we're seeing from the Exhibit 51. So
is it 4, 4, 2, 2, or is it 4, 4, 2.5, 2.5? Because
2 and 2. Yeah,
2 and 2. Okay.
Yeah.
Why don't I'll get to the exact number. You're targeting a 12% increase over the period, correct?
Well, yeah.
It's a
Well,
little
4
more than 12. It's like 12 and some 0.2 or something.
Yeah, 4422 is 12.75.
So it's almost 13.
Or almost 12.5, depending on your point of view.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could suggest, I'm not doing any math either, but maybe Matt, if you want to go ahead and make that, I mean, I'm very comfortable at the 4% number, and it sounds like we're all not that far apart, perhaps making that motion, and I'll be happy to second it, and we can kind of see where we go. Is that?
Yeah, Simon, Simon, what is 4, 4, 2.5, and 2.5? I'm just curious what that amounts to. I'm not arguing. I just want to know what that range is.
I think it was 13.6, but
that's 13.6. Okay. I mean, just at that level, at 13.6, it would be the second lowest proposal of the constitutional officers and judiciary. And it would be, considerably less than 4% a year. So I would say it would be in line with the state employees. Look, I think 4422 is it's a very defensible position. I'd love to go a wee bit higher. And I think that there's a justification for 4.4, 2.5, 2.5, but I think I could be open and flexible.
at the 2.0 at the ends, it's 3.4% over the life of the contract. I mean, annualized. I'm sorry, annualized. So that's.
And I feel that that's still pretty generous. I mean, I like Commissioner Rakowski's kind of compromise here for what it's worth. I think it gets us pretty close. I think it's something that's not, over and above what you might see in the private market. And then considering where people are, many unemployed in the state still, and many still struggling think it's something that I would feel more comfortable with than the 4-4-4-4 personally, but. we all
Oh,
have
I'm
equal
off of
votes here, so-
4-4-4-4. I was just looking at the last 2 years at 2 versus 2.5. So,
I would feel more comfortable with 2 each year to get you closer to that, 3% annual, which is where I think many organizations will be over the next 4 years.
Mark, I'd like to make a motion that we submit a resolution moving forward that we have salary adjustments for the year 1 of 4.0%, year 2, 4.0%, year 3, 2.0%, and year 4, 2.0%.
Is there a second for that motion?
Could you repeat that?
For year, the resolution would be a salary adjustment beginning in year 1 of 4.0%. Year 2 would be an additional 4.0% adjustment. Year 3 would be 2.0, and year 4 would be 2.0.
and that is compounded again, just what the number is, just so. Is that 12.8 or was that in the low 13s? I forget.
That
Stand
gets you to
by.
12.2 or 12 and a half. Roughly.
12.5, right? Yeah, 12 and a half.
I think Mr.
Marco,
James,
would that be in line with what you said state employees are going to probably be doing over the next 4 years?
No, mine was more just speculation on what I think,
Okay,
other private sectors will probably be in line with that type of inflation.
Right.
Hopefully, if we can curb this hyper labor inflation in the private market. So
Okay.
versus a 4% increase in labor expense. And like I said, I think I view these as leaders of the state, and those tend to
Right.
be on the lower end of COLA adjustments
Right.
each year. So
Would 3% a year ruffle feathers, Wendell? Would you be okay with that?
I'd have to,
That'll land us in about the same place, wouldn't it? Numerically, Marco, after 4
Less.
years? A little less?
you're saying 3% a year?
Yeah.
It would get us more or less there. I'm running those numbers now.
Okay,
I think the idea was, though, to front load it.
right. But
that would make it 14.7 total. So,
okay,
and 14.7 divided by 4. So it's almost 3.7% annualized. That's what that would be. But it's a lot more than what people are getting. So,
3% a year would be, I'm not sure how 3% a year.
oh, no. I think I used the 3% as the last 2 years. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I maybe I misunderstood, Lawrence.
I was
that
on
what you was-
3-3-3-3 was what I was saying.
Oh, no.
I wouldn't front load. I was just saying if we didn't front load it, just made it across the board 3 as opposed to going 4.
You get to the same
sorry,
number.
I didn't do
You get to
that.
the same number roughly if you do 3% across the board.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why I put 4 at the beginning, because somebody had mentioned, I apologize for who it was, but somebody had mentioned, hey, let's try to do something to bump them up early.
Yeah.
So that's why I did it now. So,
Okay.
or did it that way. So,
Yeah, I mean, 3% across the board is like 12.6 compared to 12.8.
that's
It's
fair.
It's about the same.
it's minimum.
Right.
It's pennies less. It's actually less, but it's not much less. So,
Okay.
It is less, but it's relatively small.
So Commissioner Orkowski did make a motion for 4%, 4%, 2%, and 2%. I'll just open it up for
I
anybody to second that.
I second it.
Okay, so we'll take a vote. And if people could just raise their hand if they, for each, just so we can make sure that we have it, and we'll have either support, a yes, no, and then if people want to abstain from this vote as well. So all in favor of a 4%, 4%, 2%, 2% growth, which translates to a 12% overall increase over the period, and Simon and Philip and others will get us the budget impact of those in the final salary. But if all in favor of that, please raise your hand and say aye.
I
Aye. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Latosha and Michael, I don't see you on video, but I guess all opposed.
I was scratching my chin. I'm sorry, Mark.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure what. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure what the vote. I'm very sorry. I also wanted to kind of see where
You just
everybody.
bought the car.
I'm sorry.
I think we had.
Sorry, Marco. I know my camera isn't on. My hand is not raised. I'm still thinking. So right now, I'm not in favor of what's been proposed. I was still giving it a little bit more thought with what Lawrence just proposed. And
Commissioner Kowski, I like the idea of the front loading, and I prefer the 4-4-2-2 to the 3-3-3-3. I would just be curious if there would be an appetite to go to that half point in the years 3 and 4 to 2.5. It still puts us, below everybody else except governor. And I think it puts us right around 13 as opposed to 12.5. I'm not throwing that out there as an alternative resolution. I'm just trying to see if there would be consensus on that type of point. I would be willing to sign on to that, definitely. But what's most important to me right now is trying to get consensus so that there's agreement in the recommendation.
Well,
I agree with Matt.
So
I think we've had the vote.
I've been a bit of a challenge here. We just took a vote and we had 5.
Yeah.
Well, who was the
5.
5th? I'm sorry. Who was the 5th?
It was Commissioner Prescott, Commissioner Daniels, Commissioner Dipple, myself, and Commissioner Rakowski, I believe, all voted in favor. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if I was the 5th. So
No. You would have been the 6th. So
okay.
So it's a tough to go.
No. I'm sorry.
Now at this point.
If it helps, I would not be in favor of raising it to 2.5.
And that's where I would be. So.
I guess to finish out the votes, because we do have 5 there, but I think we should have everyone, I guess, on the record on what they are supportive of. All those opposed to the resolution.
I'm not going to oppose it. I mean, look, I will support the resolution. I would love the record to reflect that, I was prepared to propose slightly higher. I think the most important thing here is to have consensus. And I feel like that the other commissioners were acting in very good faith and were responsive to the data and information. I would have preferred 4-4-2.5, 2.5, but I will support 4-4-2-2.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, Marco. I mean, I think consensus is important. I like the 4-4-4-4 option. I thought the data showed that the legislators deserved that. It was, to me, in my mind, a minimal option. I thought that the 4-4-2.5, 2.5 was a compromise, but in the interest of consensus and wanting, the record to reflect that there was consensus, I would support the 4-4-2-2, but I would just like to go on record and note that I still think that that's inadequate and that we could have gone a little higher.
Well, I appreciate both of you supporting that, even though it was lower than what you would have otherwise desired. And then Commissioner Whitson and Commissioner Harrison, would you can like to keep your opposition vote here?
No, well, if you wouldn't mind, I would, in the spirit of comedy, I think I agree with Lester. I think that I would have been comfortable at a higher position, but in the spirit of let's try to do this in a form of comedy. I feel it's okay. I'll change my vote to yes. I'll support it.
I as well would change my vote to yes, and my sentiments are the same. I just thought we could have gone a little bit higher, but I do appreciate everyone finding a middle ground.
Well, thank you all, and I know that some were at the farther end of the low range, so I appreciate you all too coming to this compromise and this consensus, and I appreciate that, and let the record reflect the votes as such, and then the vote does pass as 4% for year 1, 4% for year 2, and then 2% in year 3 and 2% in year 4. And then I would ask that the staff, if you all could circulate the updated salary numbers for us so that we are aware of what that translates to and the budget impact for the salary components. And if it's at all possible to look at any pension impacts of those, if it's these, any relevant data points related to, those salary adjustments as it impacts the pension. I'd ask that that be included as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Well,
So, Mr. Chair, just to be clear, was the consensus on the, I guess, the resolution in totality?
I believe there was consensus,
Okay.
but the record would reflect that Commissioner Gallagher would have supported something higher, that Commissioner Davis as well would have supported something higher, and then Commissioner Whitson, would you like the record to reflect that as well for
Sure,
yourself?
please.
And Commissioner Harrison?
Yes.
Okay.
And then just also clarifying that those adjustments apply to the members, and then also you have the differential for the presiding officers. So in the same manner.
Correct. That was how the vote was.
Okay.
I just wanted to point out, because I happen to have my calculator here. So the final salary will be around 56,600 in year 4. So it goes from 50,003, and I'm rounding here, to about 56,600. So just for a measurement, don't use that as the quote. You have to get the. But
We'll include the actual numbers in the resolution, which you have to view anyway. So don't worry. But yes, 56,636 is about the one.
Thanks for the detail.
So with that, that concludes all of our voting. Philip, do you want to, I guess, articulate the next steps as far as things that you need from us, and then.
So yeah, keep an eye on your inboxes. We will update with the numbers for the vote today and the resolution for the salaries. And then we'll be sending that out to you all with instructions on how to complete the signature electronically. And if anyone has any issues with that, contact us and we'll help you get sorted out. And then the full report will get compiled, and then that'll get introduced in the House and Senate when session starts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership. You ran a tight ship.
I tried to keep us, well, that 30-minute target was obviously, I appreciate everyone keeping that extra half hour open. We were 1 hour on the dot. So.
We heard you were an overachiever.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Well, thank you all. It's been a pleasure working with both the staff and the commissioners, and thank you all for your service, and look forward to continuing on with the completion of this process. And thank you all, and have a pleasant day.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay healthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.